infinite complacence, people went to and fro of the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
So on this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome on with me Aaron Deese. He is the author of the Texas Dogman Triangle. That is his book. And he is my partner on screen and guide for our brand newly released documentary, The Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lonestar State, which is now available to stream on Amazon Prime or by going to shop.smalltownmonsters.com for DVD or Blu-ray copies if those are your jam. Aaron, welcome on the show, my friend.
Shannon, thank you so much. I'm super excited. I didn't tell you this before, but being on your show has been a bucket list item for a while. So here we are.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Now, get out of here. I made it to have you on. You are a hard worker. You have been, between the book and the doc, it's not like, oh, I'm just dipping my toes in here. You've been working in the community for quite a while now.
I've been hanging out.
You're so modest.
Definitely
been hanging out. Listen to you.
I mean, this is definitely the most extensive project. I've never been in a movie before. I've never written a full book that was published before, so it definitely was my most research intensive endeavor, that's for sure.
Well, it's funny because at the end of the documentary, which truth be told, we've of course you and I got screeners way before it came out and everything, but I watched it again yesterday, just back to front, because I felt like it, and because we were going to chat again today, and I didn't want to miss anything, just in case.
Did the same thing.
Yeah, but at the end, you're like, maybe there could be a nap in here at some point after all of this. So, Seth made sure to leave that in, which I love, because you really did put in so much work in all of this.
Thank you. I didn't think that line was going to make the movie. From obviously a lot of footage gets shot and, all that stuff. So it's, you never know what's going to make it in there. But I did think that was pretty funny that they left that line in.
I love that he did, because it was just it was a true candid moment. And you meant what you said. You're like, maybe one of these days I'll sleep. We'll see.
Yeah. And I haven't, a little bit here and there, but not yet.
All right, well, let's dive in here a little bit, Aaron. Right out of the gate, why this subject in particular?
Yeah, so it happened pretty organically. It kind of fell into my lap through a very close member of the family, actually, who you spoke with during the course of filming, a gentleman named Trent. Which is a pseudonym, which I think is important. And his story mirrored for me encounters I had read about the Michigan Dogman, the Beast of Bray Road, some of what we hear coming out of the land between the lakes. And I was like, this is an atypical Dogman sighting, which is not documented anywhere else. And that, to me alone, is worth talking about. And then, I started digging a little deeper and found that there were other sightings that correlated to this one geographically. And then it just expanded from there, Shannon. It was another story led to another. And, pretty soon I had this pool of werewolf encounters in the state of Texas, and I didn't see a place where they were all collected. So that was kind of the beginning, I guess. Yeah.
And I also want to straighten something out, and that is the terminology used, not only throughout the book, but of course in the title of our movie. You have the term werewolf right in the title. Now, the term dogman, which I always chuckle at, versus the term werewolf. Why did you choose to utilize the term werewolf at all?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there are a couple reasons. First and foremost, it was consistent with the language that witnesses were using in their reports. And if we're going to research what these people have seen, I think it's it's important to describe it as they describe it. I don't like the idea of us coming in, and I use the term us very loosely, just as a community, of us coming in and listening to these people's encounters, and they just, for in this case, for example, they describe it as a werewolf, and we say, well, actually, it's a dogman. We call it dogman now because this is what this and that and the other thing. And the definition of werewolf has changed throughout history and throughout time. And if you get back to the German roots, it literally means dogman or wolfman. So in my mind, those terms are interchangeable. I also don't believe that the idea of, you got bit and now you're cursed and you transform under a full moon. I don't think that's a thing. I think that's a Hollywood invention, and we can trace that pretty much back to its roots. So again, the definition of werewolf has changed significantly throughout time, and that is what these witnesses describe having seen. So those are kind of the reasons that I use that term a lot. And also, when I was writing the book, the word dogman was in there just way too many times. So I had to had to keep the language as fresh as possible, mix it up a little bit. Otherwise, you've got dogman appearing 6 times in the same paragraph, and that's just not great writing. We can do better than that, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, as you say, as much as we love Jack Nicholson, growing fangs and popping, his shoulders and all of this and turning into a creature, that is not what we are talking about here at all, people.
No, it's fun stuff. It's a wonderful world of fiction. There's some great werewolf fiction out there, and some of it is actually intermixed with real world werewolf mythology, which is a lot of fun. But, when a witness says they've seen a werewolf and they describe it as a strange animal lurking on their property, that's how, in my mind, that's how we ought to tell the story. So,
Well, and I mean, really, when somebody isn't in this community, they may not ever come across the term dogman. And let's face it, if they did, they'd be like me and chuckle and go, what in the actual hell is this word anyway? Haha, on to the next thing. So all they have to go off of is the term werewolf from the movies, because they know what that looks like. And that's what the dogman looks like too, that they happen to see, but they don't know the term.
Exactly. And I think if we get in the habit of rewriting people's stories, and not using the terminology that they use, not quoting them directly, we start to muddy the details, and then we run into, okay, well, what was actually seen and what was actually reported. So, as a writer, as somebody who wants to record these stories accurately, that's the term the witnesses used. So here we are.
Well, in one of the locations that you and I went to for the film, when we were sitting down with Jojo, Don, and Michael and his mother, they didn't use, I think, at one point the term dogman came out, but when Michael was talking about what he had seen or what he and his mother had seen, they said hyena. They didn't use either one of those terms. So again, it just kind of goes off of what is your brain, what box is it trying to put things into?
Yeah. Like what's your frame of reference? Because for these folks you're talking about Sam Houston National Forest, which is, God, I really want to get back out there. But in Sam Houston National Forest, these folks aren't thinking about necessarily dogmen or werewolves. They refer to these things as the monsters, because they've known about them for so long. And that's, again, like you said, it depends on your perception and where you're coming from. But these things are called different things as we go.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody, and we're of course going to keep referencing the film, because not only are we proud of it, but we want you to watch it. But there are some very, and not only interesting tidbits in there, but I mean, the data goes everywhere from, as I said, Michael says hyena, and then in that same visit, we talked to Dawn, and she sees one that's like 10 or 11 feet tall with these glowing eyes, a completely different situation. And then even Michael said, well, yeah, people have giraffes around here and exotic animals and things, and they get loose sometimes. But, in the same breath, he goes, but this hyena was huge, and it easily just jumped over a 4-foot fence, which he walked us right over to that same fence. We walked the same exact path that this quote unquote hyena had made its appearance on his property. So just cool stuff. And we're proud of it. We want you guys to go watch, and it might just change your mind on these things being out there. What the heck they are, we don't know. We could probably close the interview with that instead of me putting that right in the middle right there. But yeah, it just
an important question.
Yeah, it just adds to the pot, and the pot keeps growing with the questions. So there we go.
It does. And you may have had this happen to you at Monster Fest, Shannon. I had a few people come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm so excited about this project because I'm from this part of Texas, or I have relatives that are from that part of Texas that you wrote about. And I've also heard of these things. My grandfather saw one." Or I think one lady actually told me she thought she might have seen one. So, like, that's not even data that's in the movie or the book because we just found out about it. So, this is just, I feel like we're kind of, in a way, just starting a conversation about this. I'm excited about it. I'm very excited about it. And Eli did such a good job editing the movie, dude. It even creeps me out at certain points.
Yeah.
And like, I was there for the interviews. He did such a good job.
Yeah, a huge high five to Eli on this one. Every aspect of it. I mean, when you're there, you're trying to focus and you're having a good time because you're with really good friends and you're traveling and you're in the car. But when you see the final product, it's pretty astonishing.
Mind blowing, dude. And if that opening theme by Brandon Dallo doesn't get you going, then we just have very different value systems. I'm sorry. But...
Yeah, there's other films you that'll be better for you. Yeah.
Yeah. You came into the wrong room. Sorry, but no. Yeah, there's the experience of filming it, being there for those conversations, and then seeing, like you said, the finished product. It's just like we really. This started in October. Like this wasn't even a year ago.
I know, that's what's crazy about it. And now everyone is watching it, and you're like, I hope you enjoy it, and you do mean that. So
really
yeah.
do hope people enjoy it. Yeah. It's a very big part of my life for, if you count the book research, 2 years. So I really, really hope you enjoy it. But and I found, like, I was nervous when we screened it at Monster Fest because that was the world premiere. And we, as you recall, we had a great response. The room was full. Everybody was super enthusiastic. Like, I might have shed a tear or two. It was great. But then when it went live for Kickstarters, like, a lot of my friends are Kickstarter backers. So that's when I really started getting nervous. Like, now people I know are going to see this. Now it's real. And then, like, I got to my parents' house this morning, with my son, and they're like, "Oh, we watched your movie last night." That's weird, dude.
Right. You're like, what? I mean, it's coming, but you're like, oh, you did? Oh, you actually did sit and watch the entire thing? No, I thought that, and I'm glad that you brought up the intro, because I was in there for a portion of that screening. You stayed in there for the whole thing with the crowd, and I'm very glad that you did. But they got it. We got the chuckle that we were going for, and I'm like, we kind of looked at each other like, yeah, they get this, they get where we're going with this, because it's gonna, like, it takes a turn real quick, but so there's a little moment of levity, but yeah, it was great.
And I think that's important. Like, one, I think our community takes itself way, way too seriously sometimes. And I mean, just the general paranormal community at large, again, on the whole, I think we sometimes take ourselves too seriously. So I like that what is pretty serious and dark subject matter at some points, I like that we could handle it with, like you said, a little bit of levity and not take ourselves too seriously going into it, but at the same time, handle it respectfully and tell these stories as they're being told by the witnesses, not putting our own spin on it or trying to sell something,
And I wanted to ask you, because you, as you say, you've been working on this stuff for a couple of years, and I'm sure that you've had contact with some of the people, obviously, that we went to their property, went to their house, and were lucky enough to get to talk to them. What was it like for you to actually be at, this location that you had been talking about with somebody for maybe up to 2 years, to actually be there?
Incredibly surreal and very cathartic. Yeah, those are the two best terms, because you've read, like you said, you've read about these places, you've researched them, you think you know the stories pretty well, you have in your mind an image of how this stuff might have played out, and then you actually show up and it kind of fills in a bunch of little gaps and details for you, but it also redefines it because you're in this place now. You're seeing what the sun looks like at this time of day. You're seeing where the shadows fall, and now you're imagining what it might have looked like if this thing were sprinting through the clearing over here, at least for me. So very cathartic, very surreal, almost like playing a video game, like an out-of-body experience a little bit. Especially when we went to Plum Creek in Lockhart. That was super wild because we had just got done talking with James Witter and his wife, who doesn't appear in the film, but she also filled in a lot of gaps for us. Super nice lady. And then he directed us to this place where some sightings occurred, and we just walked down to the water. And I'm like, we're here. We're standing right here. Like, it was the closest equivocation I can think of, and I actually said this in another interview earlier today, but it was like the first time I went to Point Pleasant, or the first time I went to Area 51 or Roswell. Just this crazy moment of like, I'm actually here. I'm actually in this place. It really exists. Yeah.
Yeah, to be talking to James, who actually had experiences seeing what essentially was termed the Plum Creek Monster. I mean, this is a straight up badass cowboy who at one point actually tried to rope one of the larger of the two, that it was a sighting of two of these things. And he's like, I'm just going to try to rope this dude right here. And I'm like, what?
I get chills every time I hear that sequence, or, see it in one of the clips or trailers. I really like that was a part of some of the preview marketing so people could kind of get a glimpse at that. But just all casual. Yeah, I'm going to try roping it. This guy tried to, to oversimplify it to the nth degree, this guy tried to lasso a werewolf.
Yeah.
He's standing there talking about it like all casual. Such a cool story. Such a cool dude. Yeah.
Yeah, we were very lucky to talk to who we did. So a huge applause to, I know that you had a lot to do with who we ended up speaking to, as well as Heather and Courtney, I'm sure did too. I know it was a team effort, but a huge high five to all of you guys.
Heather is the one. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
yeah,
go ahead.
You guys were amazing. Heather is the one that did the majority of tracking these folks down. I had written about the stories and researched them, but I hadn't been successful in contacting them. So yeah, I definitely want to give credit where credit's due for that.
Yeah, I always call her the wizard, and she's amazing.
She is.
All right, let's, because we can't get away from this without talking at least a little bit of the history for people that are not really adept at it, which, by the way, I was not when I came into the whole, filming of this. And I've taken quote unquote witness statements essentially on my show, right? We hearing encounters and things like that, but it's not a subject that I had heavily researched, whereas you had. So it was a good dichotomy between two people that are on opposite sides of that werewolf coin, the wolf coin. So for those others that are like me, they don't know a whole lot about this, especially the history. And you can just give a general, stroke of whatever you'd like, either a general all over the world, or even if you want to keep it local to Texas, totally up to you. But let's hear a little bit of the history of these dudes.
Yeah. So we can, and I'm glad you asked this because I've been doing more research into this stuff lately, just because I can't escape from it. But we have beings in Mesopotamian folklore that resemble human canine hybrids. Some incarnations of Pazuzu, which is a name that a lot of people are probably familiar with if you're listening to this show. But also this entity known as Urudimu, the gruesome hound, are described in some poems and scriptures as being half dog, half human hybrids. And we don't go back much further in recorded history than Mesopotamia. We just don't. And then you get over to ancient Greece and you have the story of King Lycaon. You go over to Mesoamerican tribes and you have the Nagual, who could transform into jaguars, owls, rats, and dogs. The Native American skinwalkers, a little more recent, we've got the Rougarou of the Deep South and the French folklore. They're just everywhere. They've been a part of human folklore and literature for as long as those things have existed. And then, of course, they get wrapped into pop culture and they become very inundated in our films and our video games and our movies and our books, which I think is great. But I think a lot of us probably think of, the history of the werewolf. We think of it as maybe having started in the 40s, with the Lon Chaney Jr. movie. But really, that was just the beginning of us making movies about it. Mankind's relationship with the werewolf as, if nothing else, a literary and cultural archetype goes back to the dawn of our recorded history. And then you fast forward to the 21st century, and we have Texas Hill Country folk who are raised with shotguns in their hands saying, I saw one of these things and it scared the hell out of me. And that's it. For me. That was why I was like, I'd like to write a book about this. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on why they're always so pissy and grumpy in everybody's face? They got no problem, having people see them and they're like, yeah, here I am. Good luck sleeping the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it depends on what they are, which again, the question of what they are is a multi-sided multifaceted dice. What are those dice they use in Dungeons and Dragons? The D20s. It's one of those. Like that can go on for a really, really long time, and we can come up with an infinite number of conclusions. But if it's an animal and it's some kind of a hybrid or a one-off or a mutant, maybe that aggression is a result of its genetic properties or whatever. Some dogs are, or some dog breeds are naturally more aggressive than others. And I'm a big believer that it depends on the owner and how the animal is treated. But, that's just a fact. Some breeds do have more aggressive tendencies. So it could be that. If they're spectral or interdimensional or, elemental beings, something like that, which a lot of people continue to postulate, then maybe it's an effect that encountering that paranormal phenomena has on the witness. Like it's just something inescapable because we've seen something from outside of our reality. Or if these things, and this is my last guess, or if these things are cultural archetypes, just ideas or shared memories that we carry around with us, maybe they represent things like anger and fear and depression. And maybe when our minds manifest something like that in reality, we suffer lingering effects. I don't know. Those are theories that I like to toss around, but we just, like we said, we don't know enough.
Did you come across any positive encounters with these things in all of the research that you've done?
I came across one, and I don't know if you would call it positive so much as neutral, but we didn't get into it in the movie. Unfortunately, this witness stopped answering my emails after after our initial interview. They did send a book release though, so it's all good. But one of the witnesses, a guy by the name of Killian Geyser, possibly saw one of these things crossing the road down near Conroe County, which is pretty close to the Sam Houston area, just to give you an idea of. Oh no, wait, we were in Conroe County, I believe.
I think
Sam
so.
Houston is huge. Yeah, sorry, it's a big space, but it's near Sam Houston National Forest. And he saw one of these things possibly crossing the road. And he specifically said in his statement, I didn't feel afraid. It didn't seem aggressive. It actually seemed like it might have wanted me to see it. And he did not describe any lingering feelings of fear afterward. That's really the only encounter I could describe as even remotely positive. They seem to run from like neutral, chaotic to downright like malevolent, unkind beings. At least in Texas.
It's that humidity. I say it all the time, even just about the skunk apes. Bigfoot in Florida are always
Hey,
pissed off. It's that humidity, man.
we could joke, but that makes a lot of sense. We hit 105 degrees yesterday. So there was a guy in San Antonio that cooked hot dogs on his dashboard, made a whole thing about it. So that'll make you irritable. Yeah.
I'm glad we filmed when we did. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's outline, because it is the word triangles in the book and in the title of the movie. So let's outline the points of the triangle that you uncovered.
Absolutely. So, we start in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's a cluster of sightings around there. We go south down to the San Antonio area, and again, a cluster of sightings there. And then it finally ends over in the southeast in Houston. And if we draw the lines on the map from these cities, and they actually show this in the movie, which I really like. Jonathan Dodd did an amazing job with the map. Some of these encounters take place outside the actual lines of that triangle, maybe by a few miles, maybe over by a county. But if we're trying to define a geographic space, it makes sense to choose points of reference that people are familiar with. And if you're looking at a map of Texas, Kerrville basically is San Antonio. If anyone in Kerrville hears this, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. But if you're looking at a map of the United States, or of Texas in particular, Kerrville is very close to San Antonio. So, for example, it makes sense to choose these 3 points of reference that people are familiar with. And they also kind of serve as an anchor point, because if we see sightings within and without the triangle scattered around the Dallas area, obviously there's a hub of activity here. And we see the same thing in the San Antonio corner and the Houston corner. So those are the 3 anchor points, if you like. But I do like to state specifically that, yeah, if you zoom in on the map, this one might be a couple miles over the line. But,
Yeah, nobody stone us for just a little left or a little right.
Yeah, yeah. And I've speculated about this before too. Like, as more people come forward, maybe this triangle won't make sense anymore. The Texas Dogman triangle could be an obsolete term 2 years from now.
That's true.
In a way, yeah, I hope that's the case. I hope we get so much more information from these areas that we don't have reports from yet that a triangle doesn't work anymore. We'll see. But I do think this is a good place to start.
And what about commonalities of these areas? I mean, when you're talking about A metropolis like Dallas. And that's the top point of the triangle. What are the commonalities of these areas? Are they super close to national forests? You know, what's the topography of areas like this?
Yeah, so the areas in which the sightings are the thickest, it seems like we have a lot of ranch land, a lot of national parks, like you said, a lot of just brush country and uninhabited space. A lot of these roadside sightings take place when people are driving just through undeveloped areas that don't seem to be anything in particular. Very often ranch land, like I said before. That seems to be the common element in the Texas dogman sightings, is that there's always a lot of water around, at least nearby water sources, areas where we have a lot of white-tailed deer, a lot of small game, and again, national parks and ranches. And if you think about those two areas, they're land that's privately or publicly controlled. It is monitored, like someone is in charge of it, but there aren't a lot of people all over it all the time. You know, if you're a rancher and you own 100 acres, even if you got a few people working for you, that's still a ton of space. So what we're looking at are very vast areas where there just aren't a lot of human eyes all the time.
Yeah, and by the way, for people that, and hey, I've been guilty of this myself until I went to Dallas many years ago to visit my uncle who still lives in that area. But you think of Texas and you think of wide open space and dust. It's a dust bowl with the tumbleweeds blowing across, and that is just not the case for the entire state. It changes so much. It is hard to impart. There are forests and swamps. And I mean, you cover that in the doc, but if you don't know, then you don't know. But there actually is plenty of food, cover, and water in Texas for something like this, whatever the hell they are, to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a ton of caves down here too. The Edwards Aquifer cuts right up through the state and runs up into the, other parts of the country. That's a massive underground cave complex. Not saying they live there, but I'm just saying we have a lot of caves. And like you mentioned in the film, Shannon, we have a lot of limestone here too. So that also kind of takes us back to the maybe supernatural question, but yeah, the environment and the topography here is incredibly diverse. Just driving from Austin to San Antonio, for example, which used to take about 90 minutes. Now it takes about 2.5 hours. But you're going to see forests, grassland, hills, little craggy ledge areas, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it did take forever to get around. I'll tell you that. Boy, everything is spread out. That is no joke, but it is the largest state, so I guess it makes sense.
It is. I mean, we literally traveled the triangle.
Yeah.
We didn't make the final stretch back up to Dallas. Maybe next time, but we did travel from Houston to San Antonio, the San Antonio area, all the way, or no, sorry, Dallas to San Antonio to Houston. We made that whole trek.
So when you're talking to somebody, and I don't know if you've actually had to defend in such a way, and maybe the term skeptic might be too strong a word, but okay, let's pretend. You're talking to a skeptic, and not that you can argue with folks like that, but let's say someone is going, what a bunch of freaking malarkey. You're talking about dogmen and werewolves and all this stuff. Do you have a go-to, as far as your evidence or something that not your evidence, but whatever you've come across that you think is enough that, hey, I put 2 years into this and it's not for no gosh dang reason. Here's why.
Yeah. And I kind of go back and forth on that. Cause in general, I feel like people who have made up their minds about certain things, their minds are not going to be changed. So is it worth the energy? Is it worth the effort? But at the same time, like, I stand behind this work. I stand behind the research, and I'm more than up for defending it. And I would just encourage anybody that has that mindset to, okay, well, read the book, look at the evidence. Yeah. Oh, read my book. Okay, sure. But look at the evidence, look at the encounters, look how far this history goes back. And if you're not convinced, you're not convinced, and that's fine. But if you haven't done that, if you haven't looked at the research and looked at the notes, and you know what, if you want to dig into this on your own, totally independent of the book, go for it. I guarantee you're going to find the same results. I'll die on that hill. I'll say that right now. You're going to find the same results, at least in terms of the data that's out there and how people are responding to these things and the areas in which they're taking place. I'd also be tempted to maybe ask, okay, well, tell me why it is that you feel that this is a complete bunch of nonsense, especially if we're inside the cryptozoological community and we're talking to people who think that Bigfoot might be, a portal jumping interdimensional, but werewolves can't exist. Okay, dude. All right. All right. I hear that. I don't understand it, but I hear that. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does, and I've never understood that either. I'm like, well, you're so strong over here. You're like arguing with folks online about this, but what we're doing is crazy. What?
Yeah, yeah. Like if you look at any, maybe I'm preaching to the choir or speaking the obvious, but if you look at any aspect of the paranormal niche, it's all totally wacko compared to what we think of as the regular, normal day-to-day life that most people live. So I don't see anything as being off the table, but that's a soapbox I don't need to get on right now. So,
Well, speaking of that, and maybe we'll keep you on that soapbox, because it does come up, especially in the book, I think more than it did in the doc. But what are your thoughts on, and how much of your toe or foot would you dip into the pool that Dogman is just another type of Bigfoot, or just simply essentially a misidentified Sasquatch? You know, as a Sasquatch type that has this snout, essentially.
yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up. So I do think there's room for that. And if we take every dogman encounter, all over the map, all the ones we know about, not just in Texas, but across the country, sure, let's say that some of these are misidentified Bigfoot sightings. But then we're getting into the territory of explaining one thing we don't know with another thing that we don't necessarily know. Because while I believe that Bigfoot does exist at some capacity, I also don't know what it is. So for me to look at a sighting of what may be a dogman and then try to narrow it down and say, well, it's actually probably a Bigfoot because of X, Y, and Z, we don't know for a fact that X, Y, and Z is Bigfoot activity. Furthermore, it also begs the question, and Jasmine With over at Cryptid Campfire made this point. I told her I was going to quote her on this at one point. I was talking to those guys the other day. If you see a big, shaggy, upright form and you're making something up, you're inventing a hoax, you're more likely to say, I saw a Bigfoot, because that's easier for a lot of people to digest versus I saw a werewolf. And I think when that distinction is striking enough that the witness notes it, that's worth talking about. And you'll hear the response that, like, well, these folks just didn't know what they were looking at because they haven't been researching Bigfoot their whole lives. And my response to that, with no disrespect to the people that are doing that research, is, okay, but where's your specimen? How can you say unequivocally that this person saw this thing or that thing when we're still trying to define what that other thing is? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for me, the biggest problem with that argument, aside from the fact that these are distinctly canine descriptions. And very often these witnesses are getting good looks. It's not always just a glance or a roadside sighting. Sometimes these are middle of the day. Sometimes these are from a few meters away. They're getting good looks at them. And I think if you get a good, 10-second stare down from a Bigfoot, you're going to be more inclined to call it a Bigfoot than say, yeah, it looked like a hyena on two legs. So I just think it's too easy. I think it encourages us to write it off and to not do any further research. And as I'm sure you would agree after being on this film shoot, and as I learned after researching for this book, there's more research that needs to be done. So
Something for me that, and of course, once it's out in the ether, especially after the advent of the internet, it does kind of cut the tail off of this. But anything before that is the older reports that and this is just a very small aspect of this, but it always stuck with me. And I think to be present for this and to hear this would add to the freakiness of it. But the whole joints popping aspect of Dogman is something extremely interesting to me. It's something that I keep going back to. And as I say, once it's out in the ether, way out there, you have to be a little more skeptical because people could just, regurgitate that detail. But for those earlier reports where it's copied, states away just from like a newspaper or whatever it is, word of mouth, there's something to that. The whole joints popping thing though, I don't know if that's even something, I don't even know where to go with this discussion of that, except that part of it is just so odd to me and it's so highly specific to the Dogman. I don't think I've ever heard of a Bigfoot sighting where they're like, and it went from crouching to standing, and it sounded like an 85-year-old man. It just doesn't happen for Bigfoot, but Dogman.
Turns out Bigfoot has a bad back.
Get your brace, homie. But yeah, it's just such a strange aspect to these creatures, is that old joints popping thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's another thing. I didn't see that. That does, just because I didn't see it doesn't mean it's not there, but that didn't seem to come up much in encounters with the Texan Dogman, if we want to call it that. Maybe one or two stories, but that's one of those things that you hear. It comes up a lot in these discussions, but then at least the cases I've looked at, it doesn't seem to be a prevalent detail. So maybe if I'm looking at another area, we'll see more recurrence of that. But I've yet to talk to a witness that said, yeah, I heard the joints pop. So I don't know.
Maybe that's in drier climates, right? The joints are a little more lubricated in Texas.
Maybe that's it. They're so sweaty down here all the time.
Everything's just a little bit more damp. I don't think that applies to joints, by the way. I'm just being silly.
It might. That's why the Texan Dogman is so angry. He is extremely hot. His joints are very lubricated, and that's not good for dogs.
Yeah. There we go. We just explained it. See how we do? Let's do part 2 because we know everything. Woo!
Nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally nailed it. It's that whole Instagram versus reality thing, You're like, well,
yeah,
cake turned out great.
And the part 2 is where we actually go back and tell the witnesses what they saw.
Yes.
Like we were talking about. That's follow up. We ask the questions in the first movie. In the second one, we lay it down.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Yeah. We're like, we're sorry you shat yourself, but here's what you really saw. It's no big deal. Or it was only a Bigfoot, right? Because that's how we explain everything. Yeah.
Yeah. They get report cards grading how well they relayed their own stories based on our expertise of paranormal work.
Yeah. And we're going to tell them how to feel too. Not only here's what you saw, but here's how you should feel about it. Now, Aaron, this comes up for Sasquatch too, of course. But from what you've researched, do these things, do they take people? Are they opportunistic? Are people in Texas in these areas a little bit more in danger when they're going hiking on these trails?
So that's another one of those things that we have conjecture, we have rumors, we don't have any hard evidence. And we can get into the conspiracy question of, okay, well, if a publicly funded entity, were aware that someone had been killed by a two-legged dog, is that something they would want out there in the public? But, you may recall from our conversation with Nick from Medina, there's talk that up to 5 people may have gone missing down there as a result of the activity of these things. Now, when I did my own digging and tried to find headlines that correlate all of this stuff, I wasn't able to find them. But, that doesn't necessarily mean that the story's not correct, because if it's a cover up, why would you be able to find it? You see, I'm going in circles now.
Yeah.
So, but we can also kind of cross-reference that with some of the older reports, like the Converse werewolf, where this thing is alleged to have killed a young man. We can also look at other reports coming from other parts of the country where they say that these things might be taking people. But in all of these cases, all we have is circumstantial evidence and conjecture. We don't have, that I'm aware of, we don't have video or photo of someone actually being set upon by one of these things. Thank God. I don't think I'd want to see that. So that the answer is maybe. And it's a sad fact that people do go missing. People do get into accidents. And when you're talking about, heavily wooded areas or very vast open spaces like we have in Texas, there is propensity for people just to fall upon misfortune and go missing. And then, that person going missing correlated to this area where dogman activity is happening. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but we have to consider it from both angles. We have to account for just day-to-day misfortune. And then we also do have to be aware of the fact that if these things are out there, which I believe they are, there's a good chance they pose a threat. So that's a roundabout way of saying I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah, I guess they finally found the remains of Julian Sands up at Mount Baldy outside of LA. So that is sad, of course. I'm sure the family is happy to have closure, because after all that time, I think it was like January he went missing. You kind of know, what, not what happened, but that he probably isn't coming back. But anyway, they found his remains. But just because if it was Mount Shasta that had happened on, it doesn't mean that that Bigfoot took him into a cave and turned his anything into a. It's just, a lot of bad shit happens in the woods, and people make mistakes, or they get lost, or they fall down, and we can't always just go to the craziest explanation for everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we forget how fragile we can be as a species. Like, a couple hundred years ago, you broke your leg in the woods, you were dead. You were as
Right.
good as dead. So if you're out in one of these uninhabited places by yourself, miles and miles from help, and you don't have cell reception, I you know, I shudder to think. It's just not. It's not like you're walking out of there and, oh, it took me a couple extra hours to get out of the woods. No, bro. Like, it might not happen. So people ask me about this, and I think about it all the time, and I wish I could come down on like a really insightful answer for it, but it's just one of those things that's so, like we've been talking about, straddles the line with what we know about how hostile nature is to human beings. So it's a tough question. It's a tough one.
Yeah, we are definitely fragile. I fell down just three of my stairs a few weeks ago, and it took about a week. But then my neck just was, just wrecked. And I'm sure that has to do with my age now. I mean, not to sound like poor me, I'm getting so old. I just mean as you age, you're not as resilient. And
it takes a little longer to bounce back.
Yeah, that really sucked.
Yeah.
So my neck was screwed up for like 2 weeks, probably gave myself whiplash, something like that. But I'm like, dude, 3 stairs took me out. Get the heck out of here with this stuff. We're extremely fragile beings.
Yeah. My neck is sore from picking up a baby. That's just how I live now. He's not that heavy. It's just sore.
Lots of bicep curls coming especially as he grows more. You're like, oh man, you got to stop growing, buddy.
I'm learning this. Yes.
Sweet little Ezra. Big shout out to that little cutie pie right there.
He's a cool little guy. The book is dedicated to him. As far as I'm concerned, the book is his. The movie's his. It's all his. But anyway, sorry.
Oh, I'm good with that. He can have it all. He's just so damn cute. All right. Well, how about you share? Pick a story, an encounter, a sighting, however you want to term it. Something that stuck out to you, or that you would just like to share with the audience from your book.
Yeah. So one of my favorite cases in the book is the Vidor werewolf. And that's one of the stories that we kind of knew about before. Lyle Blackburn had talked about it. Ken Gerhard had talked about it in other places. It's in some of their books. And so I'm hardly like, I didn't discover this case or anything like that. But the reason I like to reference it is because it's so well documented. We have dates, we have times, we have matching physical descriptions from multiple witnesses, we have statements from law enforcement. It was all documented by an area newspaper. We don't get much better than that in cryptozoology cases unless we have photos. And if we have photos, that's almost in some ways worse, because then everyone spends all their time picking apart the photos as opposed to looking at all this verifiable information that we have. And it's also another story wherein someone opened fire on one of these things at close range and it kept coming. It's also another story wherein you have domestic dogs being attacked by these things. So it checks off almost every single box on our list of like, okay, well, what does this cryptozoological encounter have? It hits almost every single mark. And it's cool. I've seen, not saying this is because of the doc or the book, there's no way for me to trace that. And again, people already knew about this story anyway. But since the book came out, I've seen a couple of blogs talking about this exact case. So people are chattering about this one, and that's really exciting. So if you haven't heard about the Vidor werewolf, check that out. There's a lot of neat stuff there.
And the domestic dogs, they were attacked and killed?
Yes. This family, the Bussingers, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but they had lost multiple dogs to what was later described as an upright walking canine, or what they believed to be. So they saw the creature, of course, and they believed that was the source of, what killed their dogs. Yeah. And then the cops showed up. The cops also saw it. Very detailed, very fascinating story. Yeah.
Ooh, even the cops got involved on that one, huh?
Yeah, which we don't always get. And a lot of times these stories end when the police show up. It ends with the police report, and then we all go home. It's not often that the cops show up and then the officer tells the reporter, yeah, no, I also saw this thing, and it's real.
Love that. Yeah, so check that out. And of course, that is detailed in Aaron's book, Texas Dogman Triangle. Last couple things here. First, would you want to see one?
Oh, dude. Yeah. I think okay, so you think things and then reality happens and it turns out you're wrong. But I think I'm as prepared mentally as I could be to see one of these things, simply because, like, if I were to have one of these encounters, I'd be like, okay, this is probably going to be scary. I'm probably not going to like this very much. So I used to say no, but at this point, yeah, like this has become a very personal project for me. And regardless of what the result is, I think if I could get a glimpse at one, that would be pretty cool. I don't expect to be happy about it afterward, though. I don't expect to feel all warm and fuzzy because it doesn't seem like anybody ever does.
No. In fact, they usually have a warm and fuzzy feeling for another reason, if you know what I'm saying. And they know it's coming usually before they even see it, which is just crazy.
Yeah. A lot of times these encounters start with auditory phenomena. Yeah.
Well, what's coming up next for you? What kind of things are you working on that you can share with everybody?
Yeah, so mine and my wife Sarah's podcast, Hey Strangeness, is officially back. We took a year and some change off for the baby and the Dogman Triangle and moving and stuff like that. But that's going on again. We just dropped a new episode, so I'm very excited about that. And there's other fun stuff going on with that, but we don't have to go through the laundry list. And then I'm still looking into this stuff, man. Like, if you're hearing this and you've seen a weird dog in Texas, look me up, because I may have said this already. Sorry, I've been saying this a lot lately. We probably have some stuff to talk about. Those are the two main things right now. Yeah, there's some other book ideas, some stuff in the works, but I'm super early into that, and I'd hate to, talk about something and then never do it. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, and if there are folks listening, please do this. Please get in touch with Aaron. Aaron, where would be the best place to get in touch with you?
Yes, you can check out our website, heystrangeness.com, or I believe there is a contact form on there, or there will be as soon as I hit publish on that page. Instagram, hey_strangeness is where I'm most active. I'm on there pretty much every day. Those are probably the two best places. Yeah.
Yeah, we like being online and getting our asses kicked sometimes, but sometimes we kick them back a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I was going to put my personal email address in there because it's on my business card, but I'm not actually going to do that. Let's go the Instagram route. Yeah, that'll
Insta's good. Facebook's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, just reach out. We'll go from there. But yeah.
Well, I'm going to close with a quote from your book because I like it. It says, "The purpose of this volume is not to convince one that werewolves exist. Of that, I am already certain. But rather, it is to indicate that something is happening in a specific area with regard to a specific phenomenon." And I think that is a great quote because it just says, hey man, just keep an open mind. I'm not saying exactly what I think it is because I don't know. I know it's out there, but just keep an open mind as you're working through this book. So again, the book is Texas Dogman Triangle by Aaron Deese, and then our documentary that's out right now, The Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lonestar State. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you. This has been so much